guys, my name is Brittany and welcome to my channel. In today's video, we're going to discuss some of the challenging dynamics that arise working as a healer in helping roles or as healthcare professionals. There are so many different personality types, triggers, and shadow work within us all. And when you meet in a space of supporting others in moments of crisis, pain, legal situations, or trauma, many unique experiences arise. Working in human services, sometimes we are deeply rewarded by holding space to help others. We learn so much about ourselves, like our abilities and strengths, but we also learn our limitations and see our own countertransference and shadow work arise. Other times we may just get it wrong and we make mistakes and unintentionally offend or let others down. Sometimes we become traumatized ourselves from the pain of others, or our own unresolved trauma becomes triggered, or we become relied upon too much and others develop a dependency on the support offered. We may also have high expectations and place so much responsibility on ourselves to help others and feel responsible for their needs and the positive outcomes of the work that we provide. Or perhaps in our efforts to be of service to others, we are attacked and blamed and become the target for others' transference and projection. Each day, each situation, and each person are different and carries different lessons and opportunities of growth and learning. Some lessons are certainly harder than others. Then we have those sweet moments with the pure love, positive intention, and goodwill of sharing healing and supportive space with others. It's normal to have highs and lows in these helping roles. Sometimes we go through burnout and need to be nurtured instead of doing the nurturing. Then other times we will get to offer mentorship and experience the fulfillment of supporting another's development. We are humans, we are going to make mistakes in this work, we are going to grieve those mistakes, and we're going to come up against challenges. But in that, we are also going to see others as well as our own resilience, strength, and development grow throughout these experiences and careers. Through this work of being of service to others, we are also given the opportunity to learn healthy boundaries, strengthen self-care, cultivate assertiveness and discernment, and develop unconditional regard and acceptance of others and ourselves. So if these kind of topics pique your interest, I'm excited to have you here for this discussion. And I'm going to break this discussion down into 2 videos so this isn't crazy long. In this first video, we are going to go over issues that are related to the interpersonal dynamics of healing relationships, such as boundary violations and poor boundaries, offending clients, transference and countertransference, coping with vicarious trauma and burnout, along with issues around codependency. Then in the second video to this, we will go over more serious issues like safety concerns and feeling threatened, having to make reports of abuse and neglect, being groomed and manipulated by a client, receiving inappropriate sexual advances from a client, and having to request welfare checks for those who may be homicidal or suicidal, along with mandated reporting. Real quick before we get started, I will be creating content on spirituality, energy work, and emotional well-being. So if you have interest in these topics, please like and subscribe for more to come. Also, if you want to reference back to this information discussed in writing, you will see a link in the description box to the blog post on this video. And while you're there, be sure to subscribe to the email list to be notified of future content. So I have about 13 years of experience working in human services and 10 of those years working as a therapist specializing in trauma. I no longer work in clinical social work and am focusing my efforts on my spiritual path and a holistic approach to healing. I have made mistakes and learned hard lessons and have held space for colleagues who have experienced the same. So I've put together some common challenges that we can come up against in this field. With that said, let's go ahead and get started. So the first challenge we will discuss is when we as healers and helping guides have unresolved issues of codependency and poor boundaries. Codependency is a behavioral and an emotional condition involving a pattern of unhealthy enabling behaviors. It typically occurs when one person in a relationship becomes excessively reliant on the other for their emotional needs, self-worth, and identity. Codependent individuals may prioritize the needs and the desires of others over their own, often to the detriment of their own well-being. Behaviors of codependency are on a spectrum from mild to severe and can involve characteristics of excessive caretaking and feeling responsible for others' needs, feelings, problems, and happiness. It can also show up as difficulty setting boundaries. Codependency can manifest as low self-esteem and worth that leads to seeking validation and approval from others. This could also create fear of abandonment, people-pleasing, difficulty expressing emotions and one's own needs, feeling dependent on others for their sense of self that causes a loss of identity, avoidance of conflict, feeling hurt by others' negative reviews or opinions, as well as wanting to control situations or people, thinking it will prevent negative outcomes or ensure the well-being of others. Codependency is also often linked to difficulty setting healthy boundaries that can cause us to work past our set schedule, not in appointments on time, giving others more time than we have to offer, leading us to work through our breaks, meal times, or at the end of the workday. This may also lead us feeling pressured to respond to clients who do not respect appropriate communication in between sessions and exhibit excessive outreach, leading us to emailing, texting, or talking on the phone between sessions about counseling needs instead of keeping that for appointment times only. Poor boundaries in the workplace can also cause us to not reinforce our attendance and billing policies, leaving openings in our schedules and having past due invoices. Another difficult dynamic is when we start to feel responsible for our clients' healing outcomes. My mentor tells me the moment we have become invested in another's outcome, we have become manipulative because we are now focused on our involvement, performance, or efficacy, and attempt to control the outcome instead of allowing and trusting the healing and life lessons to unfold as they will. This is a helpful reminder to learn and to let go of control, surrender, and center ourselves back into holding healing space for others to be themselves where they are in life as we explore some different ideas to support their well-being. I plan to make another video on healing codependency as there is a lot to say on this topic, so stay on the lookout for that. In the meantime, some tips to help overcome this is learning about codependency, attending Codependency Anonymous meetings and delving into all of their materials, acknowledging if you struggle with this, identifying areas where this gets triggered, and work to reframe the response, attend therapy to process through how and when this life pattern started, which is often associated with early childhood attachment trauma and experiences. To heal from codependency, you can work to affirm positive affirmations such as, I am worthy, I am only responsible for my needs and feelings, I allow others to be responsible fully for their needs and feelings, I let go of control, I allow the divine timing it takes for healing, I communicate, set, and reinforce healthy boundaries with ease, comfort, and confidence. I am confident and I have healthy relationships. These are just some examples of affirmations we can use and reinforce to help our mind reframe these outdated beliefs and behaviors so we don't stay stuck in the mental loop of codependent behaviors. So I have become a big believer in the power of positive affirmations, and I'm going to create an in-depth video on how to most effectively practice affirmations to help rewire the subconscious and shift our realities for the better. So be on the lookout for that as well if that interests you. The last suggestion for now on codependency is find a trusted ally to connect with to help you maintain clarity when you start to waver or in a sense relapse into old behaviors and thought patterns. Find someone who is kind but will also help compassionately and honestly guide you back to your center to help you recalibrate and get back on track for healing codependency. This can be a loved one, a healer, therapist, a coda sponsor, or a mentor. Now we'll move on and discuss what it's like working with others who struggle with codependency themselves and who have poor boundaries or who do not respect our boundaries and policies. Some clients will push past the boundaries and policies we put into place, or they hold expectations that we will fix them, and they will not hold themselves accountable to do the work needed to make lasting changes, or I have had people project blame towards me for them not being healed even after a few sessions. We have to remind ourselves and others that therapy and healing work is a walk, not a destination or a rescue mission. We have to clearly communicate our boundaries, the consequences of what happens if they're crossed, and reinforce those consequences when they have not been respected. Others may not respect our boundaries, but we must. And I know from experience and having to heal codependency myself that this is really tough and takes years of healing work, self-study, gaining knowledge, and cultivating self-awareness to catch ourselves from repeating these patterns. So there is no perfect formula when it comes to setting boundaries, but I have a 3-rule system that helps me approach how to address boundary issues. And the first time a boundary is violated, we discuss this in detail where the overstep or violation occurred, as this may have been an innocent oversight on another's part, and it's helpful to gain more information to clarify the reason why this happened. During this time, I'll provide an explanation as to why it is a violation or an overstep, the expectations for healthy therapeutic interactions, and what will occur as a consequence if the boundary is overstepped again going forward. Whether this is offering another reminder or letting the client know if this happens again, it will result in termination of services or being sent to collections or being charged for missed appointments. These first-time boundary violations could just be out of a lack of knowledge of how these professional relationships are set up, what the policies are, or due to situational stressors. By communicating and setting healthy boundaries, it helps you to model healthy relationship skills, which can help the client improve areas around this in their own personal lives. If the boundary violation happens again, then the consequences discussed prior to this will be enforced, and it's shared that this will be the last notice of this, and the third time it occurs, it will have to be decided whether this results in a termination of services or added charges to cover late fees or late cancellations. It will then be explored with the client if this is an area where therapeutic work can be addressed, and to gain more information regarding the reason for them choosing that behavior. If relevant, you and the client can work to address this in therapy to work and see if it can be processed around for healing and healthier responses. This offers the benefit of the doubt and an opening for some deep and potentially positive healing work around relationships and respecting boundaries. However, if the boundary violation occurs a third time, this is a sign to me that the person is fully educated now on the appropriate parameters of a therapeutic relationship and the practice policies. They have been informed of the consequences and had them reinforced, and they are still choosing to show disregard or a lack of respect to these boundaries, whether they mean to or not, and this is a sign that the relationship dynamics have been compromised. And having to offer harder lessons of terminating services and providing referrals is at times the best way to model consequences of healthy boundaries when they are not upheld. Now, I'm referring to more minor boundary oversteps like chronic tardiness, late cancellations and no-shows, not paying invoices on time, or texting, emailing, or calling too frequently in between sessions, and trying to discuss therapy matters outside of session. The major boundary violations will be discussed in the second video, which I will have linked in the description box below. Every situation is unique, and it isn't best to put a one-size-fits-all model on anything, so use your own discernment and talk with colleagues and mentors to help create clarity and best practice on how to address certain situations around boundary oversteps or violations. Sometimes when a client is no longer engaged in participating in their healing work and have created a reliance or dependence on the services or the healer, this can also be a sign that termination of services would be most helpful if after addressing this, it's still a reoccurring theme. This can be very difficult to do and create feelings of abandonment, but can be necessary to not foster an unhealthy relationship dynamic that will not serve the client's true long-term well-being. Many healers may be recovering from codependency, so we may have a higher threshold of tolerance when it comes to people pushing past our boundaries, since we learned that it was a normal and familiar thing from our childhoods. But we need to do our best to make sure we do not ignore red flags or boundary violations, and that this is where education, frequent self-examination, self-honesty, supervision, and actively engaging in our own healing work is essential to stay balanced as a helping guide when working with others for everyone's safety and growth. The last thing we will touch on around boundaries is what to do when a client asks for a hug or says I love you. It is my policy that I do not ask others if I can hug them as a healing guide to err on the side of caution, comfort, and each person's own safety. If I'm asked for a hug, it's assessed on an individual basis whether it would be appropriate and how the client intended to receive this form of connection. Clients who meet diagnostic criteria for a personality disorder, there is a hard rule of having no physical touch due to issues around healthy boundaries to ensure both of our safety and that clear boundaries are being maintained at all times. If the request seems like a genuine gesture that does not have any concerning underlying intent or misperception of what that gesture would mean, then a hug or a side hug is shared. If a client asks to make this a regular practice each session, this may need to be addressed and healthy boundaries communicated based on your own discernment around the appropriateness of that request. Some colleagues, especially male colleagues, have shared that they have a firm policy on no physical contact and share that they appreciate the request and sense of trust and safety the person has with them, but to ensure everyone's ongoing comfort level and safety, they will uphold the policy to maintain professional boundaries of no physical contact. If this offends or triggers transference within the client, it can be used as a point to address within their healing work to resolve and accept others' boundaries without feeling it's personal. Setting boundaries and having others set boundaries with us isn't easy, especially when we were not taught healthy boundaries as a child. So when someone sets a boundary with us, it can feel personal, triggering guilt, shame, embarrassment, and anger, which are great leads into potential healing work to address with the client if that happens. The last thing that we will touch on that can occur sometimes is when a client says, I love you. If there's boundary, personality, safety, and concerning mental health concerns, this is certainly not appropriate, and boundaries need to be put into place and education on what healthy therapeutic alliances look like and what is and is not acceptable so they understand. However, when this was said to me, it did not have these circumstances involved, and these felt like sincere gestures of gratitude and connection. For example, when working with children, they may be more prone to ask for hugs or say I love you. It pulls on my heartstrings not to offer their innocent nature this love in return, but it always is essential to follow agency guidelines on this when it comes to physical contact. Another time when I would receive statements like this was when working with elderly clients with dementia or non-English speaking clients that I felt really were just expressing their gratitude. Instead of saying I love you in return to maintain professional boundaries, I would offer responses like, thank you so much. Your heartfelt gratitude means a lot to me. I appreciate you and am grateful for the work we get to do together. Thank you for trusting me and allowing me to hold space with you. It is an honor getting to work with you, and your words touch my heart. Thank you, you are dear to my heart. You are a special person and I will keep you in my heart. These are just some of the examples of the ways that we can compassionately respond to these statements that come from good and clear intent. When these type of interactions occur, they will need to be assessed on an individual basis, the appropriateness, along with the safety and comfort involved, always honoring your level of comfort and boundaries. The next thing we will discuss in this video is transference and countertransference. Transference is a concept in psychology that refers to the unconscious transfer of feelings, attitudes, and patterns of behavior from past significant relationships onto a present relationship with another person. This can arise more often within the therapeutic relationship than in other healthcare roles due to the intimate nature of the work and addressing deeply personal and emotional and sensitive topics. The term was first coined by Sigmund Freud, who believed that transference occurs when a person unconsciously projects unresolved feelings or conflicts from past experiences onto a therapist, which can then influence the way they perceive and interact with that person. For example, a person who had a difficult relationship with their mother may unconsciously transfer their feelings of anger or frustration onto their therapist, which can then affect the therapeutic relationship and the progress of therapy. Alternatively, a person who had a positive relationship with their father may unconsciously transfer feelings of trust or admiration onto their therapist, which can also affect the therapeutic relationship and healthy outcomes of the therapy work together. Transference is a normal and natural part of the therapeutic process, and therapists are trained to recognize and work with transference in order to help their clients better understand and resolve unconscious conflicts and emotions. Therapists can do this by bringing these unconscious patterns to the surface, having open conversations around this to cultivate awareness, and to discuss treatment approaches to navigate working through these feelings. Addressing transference can help clients achieve greater self-awareness, personal growth, emotion regulation, and healthier relationships. Identifying and addressing this as the therapist helps cultivate understanding that the client responses towards them are not personal and can be a form of projection and an important area of focus for treatment. Receiving another person's transference can be difficult. We can be idolized, others may have high expectations of us to meet their needs and see us as an authority. We can become relied upon more than what is helpful. Clients may want to be our friend or develop a romantic interest in us, or we are blamed and receive negative feelings of others towards us from their former experiences. We must learn to navigate many complex situations, and another aspect that can occur is others can create ideals or fantasies of who they think the healer is, how they live their life, or imagine they have an ideal life, have figured out the answers to complete healing, do not suffer or endure challenges like they do, or expect them to be a certain way. Appropriate self-disclosure can be helpful for others to see that we are all human and together doing this life thing, which is sometimes beautiful and abundant, and other times painful and sorrowful, and no one is excused from these realities. When we use self-disclosure in these ways, it can help the client release these ideas of there being a power differential and that healers or helping professionals are not above the human condition and do not have all the answers and are going through this healing and learning journey no different. This can help redirect these expectations in healthier ways for the client to see that they do not need to measure their progress to anyone else's, and all the healing work that is truly done is within themselves. The therapist is only a guide for them to discover this truth in their own power, potential, and inner direction. Next, we will discuss countertransference, which refers to the therapist's emotional or psychological response to a client, which may be unconscious. It involves the therapist's feelings, attitudes, and unresolved issues that are triggered by the client's behavior, words, or experiences, and it is considered a normal and inevitable aspect of the therapeutic process. Therapists are trained to manage and recognize their countertransference reactions because they can influence the therapeutic relationship and the effectiveness of the therapy. It's essential for therapists to understand their emotional responses and how they might impact their ability to provide objective and helpful guidance to their clients. For example, a therapist might experience countertransference if a client's behavior reminds them of someone from their own past, leading to emotional reactions that may not be directly related. By being aware of these reactions, therapists can explore their own emotions and ensure that their responses to clients are based on the client's needs rather than the therapist's own unresolved issues. Now we will explore some different ways countertransference can show up. There may be a time that a client triggers feelings of being unsafe or feeling threatened, whether this is from their trauma history, demeanor, or a part of their personality that triggers this within us. If a client triggers something like that within us and we are aware it may just be our own countertransference and our own hypervigilance, I think it's still our job to ensure a sense of emotional and mental safety, and if this cannot be resolved in a safe way in your own healing work and supervision, then a helpful approach would be to honor your experiences and seek to serve the client in the best way through terminating services and providing a referral. I was once screamed at by a client who was very distressed and hurting within their own rights, and they lost control of their emotions and projected the pain of their childhood trauma onto me, and this was a very startling and frightening situation. My inner child no longer felt safe as this triggered childhood trauma of mine, and it was communicated with them that if this type of response occurred again, then services would be ended. We took a treatment approach together to strengthen stress tolerance and emotion regulation, and were able to continue our work finding ways to honor both of our needs and to do so safely. However, a colleague shared that they were deeply triggered by a client and the client's trauma history, and they had to make the difficult decision to inform them that they could no longer be of service to them and needed to end their work together and provide a referral. They knew they needed space to process for themselves before overextending themselves and their emotional limits to working with someone where unresolved trauma and countertransference was occurring. Again, each situation is unique and will have to be up to each person on how they address these dynamics when they arise. Other challenging issues around countertransference is if a therapist begins to develop romantic feelings towards their clients. If this occurs, seek immediate supervision and terminate and refer the client due to the objectivity of the therapeutic relationship being compromised by these feelings. It is not encouraged to share these feelings with the client when referring, as we must ensure their sense of safety and uphold appropriate boundaries. Terminating services immediately and referring when this happens also can help ensure that this does not lead into compromising your own ethics, values, and integrity from exploiting the client in this way and coming onto them or pursuing a relationship with them. Then within your own therapy work and in supervision, work to address these feelings and issues and explore and process any reoccurring themes of countertransference that happens in this way. Another difficult area like this is if we begin to have fondness of clients and desires of wanting to be their friend or to go into business with them or vice versa. We must always uphold healthy boundaries within these relationships and remind others and ourselves that this is a healing relationship and I am a friendly professional, but I am not a friend or a potential business associate or partner. We must not exploit this relationship in this way, cross this boundary, or open ourselves up to significant liability issues. We are humans and it's normal to want to connect with others, but professional judgment and ethics must always be front and center around this. The last thing that we will note is when therapy comes to an end with a client we enjoyed working with, whether they stopped attending, became upset with us and terminated services, it was mutually agreed upon to end services because they had met their healing outcomes and goals, or they passed away from an accident, violence, health problem, or suicide. It can be a normal occurrence to sometimes feel sadness or grief when these therapeutic relationships come to an end. As humans, we create bonds and attachments. This doesn't mean we don't have good boundaries, it just means we have a heart that doesn't differentiate business relationships from human connection and bonding. It is normal for us to grieve these changes and the end of these healing relationships, as long as we do so appropriately and process through these feelings in our own healing work and within supervision. I know I mentioned supervision a lot throughout these videos, but even if you are a seasoned provider and have your own private practice, I would always suggest receiving weekly or at the bare minimum monthly supervision and mentorship. This is worth the cost and can be so helpful to run things by another mentor you trust to help ensure you maintain clarity, healthy problem solving and decision-making skills, but also to receive professional and emotional support as this work is demanding in its own rights. Like everyone in this human experience, we make mistakes and have to learn painful lessons, but ultimately lessons that are for the better in the long run if we can learn from them. Sometimes we overextend our support to another even though this is with good intent. It could be an unconscious drive of people-pleasing, projecting our past with a former caregiver onto them of wanting to caretake to receive validation, or we can project blame onto clients and direct negative feelings and responses to them. But if we can see these responses, then we can do our best to process through this and minimize the amount of countertransference that comes up and is triggered within our work with others. Now let's move on to the next topic of discussion, which is coping with vicarious trauma and burnout. Vicarious trauma, also known as secondary traumatic stress or compassion fatigue, is a psychological and emotional response that occurs when individuals are indirectly exposed to the trauma and suffering experienced by others. Some individuals who are deeply empathic, which refers to those that can understand and share the feelings of another person, can have higher likelihoods of experiencing vicarious trauma until stress tolerance, emotion regulation, and healthy emotional and energetic boundaries are developed. Some of the traumas we hear as healers are so disturbing and emotionally shocking or filled with deep and unexpected tragedy that it's normal for us to feel this on some level at times. Otherwise, we may be experiencing forms of emotional detachment, compassion fatigue, disassociation, or have a lack of empathy. When we feel this deep emotion from another's experience, it doesn't always lead to vicarious trauma unless it overwhelms us and we're not able to organize and process the information accurately. Then it can lead to post-traumatic stress symptoms and have a major impact on our mental health and quality of well-being. Now we'll switch the conversation to burnout, which refers to a state of physical, emotional, and mental exhaustion that can result from chronic work-related stress. These two dynamics can be common among those in human services and helping roles, and are areas we need to heal from, but also areas to teach us healthy boundaries, resilience, stress tolerance, and healthy self-care. There's a lot to say on these two topics, so I created 2 videos addressing this, which I will have linked below. In the first video, we discussed vicarious trauma and burnout in detail, the symptoms, signs, and the spiritual and clinical reasons for why they happen, and some alternative ways to heal this are offered. In the second video on this, I shared a super comprehensive and detailed holistic guide on how to heal and overcome this, so be sure to check those out. In those 2 videos, we discuss a lot of information to help us heal from vicarious trauma and burnout, but another thing that we can do to help this is to set healthy parameters around the populations we serve. If we get easily traumatized or overwhelmed by working with those who have endured sexual trauma, childhood abuse, war crimes, or who have serious health-related problems, and this triggers our own trauma history and sensitivity, it is best to change the population you serve if these issues are concentrated within the communities you provide services to, or refer those who present with these histories to other providers. Sometimes these are elements of a person's history that doesn't have to do with why they are coming to see us, and they may come up, but we could always preface at the start of services the boundaries around these issues so the client is informed of our limitations and boundaries around addressing certain problems, and they can choose to continue working with us while not addressing those areas, or they can find a provider who can explore these areas further if they come up in their healing work. Then in the meantime, we can do our own healing work around these areas and these triggers. So the last thing we will discuss in this video is when we have offended clients and some ideas in navigating this. There are going to be times we misread what the moment asked for and we unintentionally offended clients by something we said or did not say. Maybe we said the wrong thing, offered our own bias or opinion, did not validate their feelings, said something in ill timing, or perhaps in family therapy made another feel ganged up on or triangulated against. We may have given advice that was not applicable or helpful, or we tried to jump too far ahead in the healing work instead of being present with where they were in the stage of change. Or lastly, we could have upset a client by terminating services for any number of reasons, and when we are confronted by these mistakes, it can negatively impact our sense of competency and effectiveness and cause shame or guilt for not getting it right, or hurting or upsetting a client we were trying to help or support. We never know exactly how we are impacting another person's experience or how they interpret what it is that we are saying. We are human and make mistakes and can't always get it right. The only way to cultivate this balanced judgment is through making these mistakes and learning from them along with time, maturity, professional development, continuing education, and the ultimate teacher being experience itself. Even being a seasoned therapist, we will inevitably get it wrong sometimes, or we will just not be someone's cup of tea. This too is a valuable learning experience that allows us to forgive and accept ourselves as we are, as well as others. Sometimes a therapist truly makes a mistake or says things that was offensive or inappropriate, and during these times we must acknowledge these oversights, biases, and limitations and apologize to resolve the conflict with humility. We can offer a sincere apology and reflect on how to learn from this and improve one's interaction within the therapy context. Other times there will be a misperception on the client's part and they may interpret what was said much differently than what we meant, and this can feel shocking, unexpected, and confusing when we are confronted by it. We cannot assume what we say and do has the same meaning for us as it does for the client, or that they will perceive this in the way we intended for it to be received. Regardless, we can still acknowledge that we have caused offended feelings, apologize for the misunderstanding, offer an explanation without defensiveness or blaming, and discuss what healthy resolution of this matter looks like for all involved. We can also thank the client for their assertiveness and courage to share when they feel offended and for the opportunity to resolve this in a healthy and helpful manner. If the client feels regularly offended, there may be underlying factors around relational and attachment trauma, personality factors, the therapeutic relationship may have to come to an end, or we may simply not be the right provider for the other person. Working with others, we work with a range of differences in emotional maturity and development, intellectual development, social functioning, trauma histories, attachment traumas, mental health illnesses, and personality disorders, which impact functioning and interpersonal relationships. All these things should be taken into consideration to properly evaluate a circumstance from all angles, along with owning up to our limitations and areas that we can improve in. Another issue related to this that can arise is loved ones of clients can become upset with changes or boundaries the client is creating in their personal lives and relationships, or they begin to question the treatment received, leading them to reach out with upset or accusatory calls, emails, and threats. Or there are other times we may be in the good grace of a client and feel there is a positive rapport built, and then they are disgruntled, triggered, or feeling abandoned, which can lead to confrontation, verbal and physical attacks, threats, disparaging remarks and reviews made online, license complaints, or lawsuits. These confrontations can be shocking, painful, disorienting, and unexpected. We can address these issues when they arise with a client and work to resolve them in a healthy therapeutic manner, and other times when the therapeutic relationship has been ended, we must turn inward to resolve these challenges within ourselves. We must do our best to stay grounded, recognize often that this is not personal, and we cannot be responsible for others' misperceptions, actions, choices, and thought processes. However, we can take time to reflect on our mistakes, failures, and oversights, grieve and release attachments to others' perceptions of us or our reputation, and work to address and resolve our own wounds and issues from our past that this may be triggering. When unexpected or confrontational interactions occur, it's important for us to be kind to ourselves, identify self-deprecating talk or negative thought patterns around fear, shame, or guilt, and work to reframe this along with forgiving and accepting ourselves or the client if needed. We must work to accept our humanness, the human condition of making mistakes and having failures, and allowing others to be responsible for themselves, their feelings, and their actions. Lastly, we should turn towards our mentors and supervisors and peer groups to help us process through this and gain greater knowledge around our professional development moving forward. And if need be, involve legal counsel if the circumstances lead to defamation, licensure complaints, or litigation. Okay guys, we have come to the end of this video. Thank you so much for joining me in this conversation, and if there's anything you would like to add to this, please do share that in the comments so we can support our growth and gain greater knowledge from one another. If you enjoyed this content, you can help my channel out by hitting that like button and giving that subscribe button a love tap, also sharing this with anyone who may benefit from the conversation. Please join me in the next videos on part 2 on the complexities of working with others and how to become the most effective healer we can be. I will see you in the next videos, and I send you gratitude and the best vibes for success in working in the healing profession. Thank you.